Hey there. Welcome to another episode of RTD News Updates. And from today's title, the U.S. will raise the debt ceiling again. I'm going to be sharing a couple articles based upon recent comments made by Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin on the importance of raising the debt ceiling and his viewpoints on how he believes it will not become a crisis or something that will be drawn out like it has been over the previous years. And so before I actually get into those articles, I want to inform you that I had a recent conversation with Craig Hemke, of which I'll be posting out the interview tomorrow, of which he basically laid out a nice viewpoint of how the whole idea of repaying debt and things like that, it's kind of like a mathematical certainty that it is impossible to do such. So that was definitely a great interview with him. So I'll post that for you guys tomorrow. Let's dive into today's news article. So today I have 4 articles I'm going to share with you, all of them dealing with the national debt ceiling, and the budget deficit issues here. So the very first article here is from U.S. News, and it says, what are the national debt ceiling and budget deficit? The next article here is from Sputnik, and it says U.S. to raise debt ceiling in the fall of 2017. Next article here is from The Hill, and it says Mnuchin vows debt limit won't become a crisis. And when you usually hear something like that, that means it probably already is of concern or a crisis. And then the last article here is from Sputnik, and it says U.S. faces steady federal debt increase over 30 years. And so the very first article here basically just lays out somewhat of a foundation of what the actual issues are in and of itself. And so just to give you an idea of what is inside this article here, as always, I'll include the links below for you to read for yourself if you're interested in finding out more. But just to start off here, it says this is what you need to know about these 3 U.S. financial terms. And so if you scroll down, it says, what is the national debt? And just to give you an idea of what it's talking about, it says the sum total of all the money the government has borrowed and owes to its creditors, as well as the interest on the debt. It is similar to the total amount an individual might own on a mortgage, a car loan, or credit card. It says the debt is built up when the government spends more than it collects through tax revenues and fees collected on visas, airfares, and telecommunications, among other funding streams. The money is used to run all aspects of the government, from education to health care and the military, and to pay entitlements to various parties such as retirees, veterans, and others. And then scroll down a little further. And it says, as of March, this is a March article from 2017, the U.S. debt is about 19.9 trillion, and it's constantly changing. It amounts to, then it gives you some figures here, $61,365 per every person living in the U.S., $158,000 for every household in the U.S., 106% of the U.S. gross domestic product, which means we're spending more than we're bringing in. It says 560% of annual federal reserves. 560% of federal annual reserves. It says much of the debt is bought and held by individuals, institutional investment companies, and foreign governments. The debt is managed by the U.S. Treasury through its Bureau of Public Debt. The debt falls into 2 categories: intergovernmental holdings and debt held by the public. It says, what is the budget deficit? When the government spends more in a given fiscal year than it brings in through revenues, it runs a deficit. It's the same as when a person spends more he or she has in the bank, except private citizens do not have as much freedom to keep running a tab. It says the highest deficit of the GDP was in 1944 at 21.2%. During the World War II, it remained below 3% of GDP for most of the nation's history and was at 3.5% in 2016. It says the projected U.S. federal budget deficit for fiscal year 2018 is $352 billion. So they're projecting that that's what the number will be, but yet we all know that that's well understated. So it'll be a lot more than that, more so around a trillion mark, if not a little bit more than that. So it says, what is the debt ceiling? It says this is a fixed amount set by Congress on how much money the government may borrow. It's akin to a credit limit on your Visa card. It says this legislative limit was introduced in the Second Liberty Bond Act of 1917 by Congress as the U.S. entered World War I. Instead of the U.S. Treasury signing off on each of the government's loan and expenditures, it now sets a maximum limit. So this is something that always happens or occurs often. And then give you an idea of how, this issue is always something that's brought up. It says the limit has been permanently raised, temporarily extended, or revised 78 separate times since 1960. So the idea that the debt ceiling is of concern and will not be raised is kind of a joke at this point, being that it's been raised 78 times since 1960. So it's pretty much good to say that every year needs to be raised. So it's no argument there. So let's go into some of the other articles here. So here I have U.S. To raise debt ceiling in the fall of 2017. And this is from comments made by Stephen Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary today. And give you an idea of what he mentioned in here. It says, according to Stephen Mnuchin, U.S. debt ceiling issue will be successfully resolved this fall. Treasury Secretary on Wednesday said that the U.S. debt ceiling issue will be successfully resolved this year. Then it's quoted him as saying, "We are not going to let this debt ceiling become an issue. We're going to raise it," as if that was a question. The Secretary added that the Treasury will not wait to the last minute to resolve the debt issue. And then it quotes him as saying, "We will get the debt limit done in plenty of time, so there is no issues for the markets." So it sounds like his primary concern is make sure there's confidence in the overall economy so that the markets aren't affected by it. It says Mnuchin said that the best way to deal with the U.S. debt problem is to shrink the country's debt to GDP ratio through economic growth. So the question would be, how do you grow in an economy that's based upon consumption and which does very little production? So that's something to think about right there. It says the U.S. debt currently amounts to more than $19 trillion. So interesting there. His recommendation is economic growth, however that's possible. Next article here is from The Hill. It says Mnuchin vows debt limit won't become a crisis. And so once you hear something like that, in my ears, it's more so, okay, there is a crisis he's probably concerned with. And so now it's just a matter of what type of things do they do to resolve this issue or try to cover it up even more. And it says Mnuchin said he's already had talks with members of both parties on Capitol Hill and that both Democrats and Republicans understand the importance of raising the debt ceiling. He said there's no question about that. People agree. We're not going to let this become an issue. He added, by the way, we're not going to do one of those wait to the last minutes either. We'll get the debt limit done in plenty of time. Mnuchin comments on the debt ceiling will be closely watched by Washington and Wall Street, where markets have been roiled in the past by fights between the executive branch and Congress over raising the nation's borrowing limit. Said refusing to raise the debt limit could eventually cause the United States to default on its debts. So let me pause there for a minute. And so the idea that their debt ceiling will not be raised is somewhat of a joke these days, because in order to, as it says here, to basically pay our debts, we have to raise the debt ceiling. And then at that point, if you are a creditor of the government, you know, at some point you realize that they're running up a tab that they can't pay back. And then at what point do you stop lending or playing along with this game of them continue to, you know, pretend like there's a ceiling if they keep raising it? So the whole idea of a ceiling is that it's capped off at some point where you can't be raised. So if they keep raising it, they might as well remove the word ceiling altogether and just put, you know, something like just keep raising the debt and remove the word ceiling, in my opinion. It says, one of the fun parts of my job, this is Steve Mnuchin quoted, is I get to use the superhuman powers to manage the debt ceiling. So I would say, in the near term, there's nothing we're concerned about. So that right there lets me know that it is of concern, because just, you know, the fact you mention it lets me know that you're trying to play it down. So he's more down there if you're interested. Articles below. Here's the last article here, which I thought was very interesting. It's from Sputnik as well. It says, U.S. faces steady federal debt increases over 30 years. And so it shows a Federal Reserve note here, and shows some people, you know, with their hands up. I'm not sure if they're protesting or whatnot, but just, you know, caught my eye there. And then give you an idea what's going on here. It says a cumulative U.S. national debt will grow to 150% of the nation's annual economic output of goods and services by 2047 if present spending laws remain unchanged, according to the 2017 long-term budget outlook by the U.S. Congressional Budget Office released on Thursday. So this is from an article from March as well. And it's quoted as saying here, if current laws remain generally unchanged, they will be, would face steadily increasing federal budget deficits and debt over the next 30 years, reaching the highest level of debt relative to GDP experienced in this country. It says, moreover, under certain laws, the CBE Congressional Budget Office projected that the cumulative debt would be 50% in 2014. It says, in addition, annual budget deficits will increase in the next 30 years from 2.9% of GDP to 9.8% in 2047, because spending growth is projected to outpace growth in revenues. So they're basically saying that, you know, our government will continue to always outspend itself in regards to what it's able to bring in, which is never going to be a good thing. It says, CBO last released details long-term budget projection in July 2016 and issued a partial update in January 2017. The agency typically updates its 10-year budget projection in the spring in conjunction with its analysis of U.S. President's budget requests. So basically what they're saying is the government will continue to outspend anything it even considers bringing in, which is going to be a problem. So the debt ceiling will be raised. And what does that mean for you and I? That means that the money supply will continue to increase. There will always be cheap lending cost. And that means that our Federal Reserve notes that we hold on to will purchase less over time, which will eventually come to an end because eventually they won't be able to borrow anymore. And when they're not able to borrow anymore, they're going to find other ways to fund itself, which means probably just endless printing rather of actual just, borrowing directly from the Federal Reserve without having to report it or pay it back or anything like that. So just some things happening in the news here. Love to hear your thoughts on this whole budget deficit and debt ceiling and national debt issue, which is becoming of major concern for us all. So leave me a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you're new to RTD, click the subscribe button for more RTD interviews as well as news updates. Enjoy your day. Thanks.